In the Middle East, Bahrain says it intercepted Iranian missiles and drones headed for its airspace and toward regional ally Kuwait. This comes hours after Central Command announced retaliatory strikes on Iran's radar sites. Foreign correspondent Jeff Paul is live in Dubai for us. Jeff.
Yeah, John, and officials in Kuwait are describing those recent overnight strikes here in the Gulf as a serious escalation. Iran once again firing over both missiles and drones at their neighboring countries here in the Persian Gulf, which is reigniting fears that this war could once again restart. Now, according to CENTCOM, those strikes came hours after its forces struck Iranian radar sites and shot down 4 one-way attack drones. U.S. officials say Iran then fired 7 ballistic missiles towards both Kuwait and Bahrain. CENTCOM confirming 6 of those missiles were intercepted and the 7th did not reach its intended target. Now, we recently spoke with former CENTCOM Deputy Commander Vice Admiral Robert Harwood about the continued escalation in the region. He says Tehran isn't interested in peace talks. They're focused on survival, and this is his reaction to the recent Iranian strikes on Gulf countries.
Predictable. To believe that the Iranians now would actually do negotiations is unrealistic. They never have. They've always negotiated but never concluded or lost a negotiation when never winning a war.
Now, Iran continues to leverage what's happening in Lebanon. Despite a U.S.-backed ceasefire, Israeli forces and Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah are still exchanging strikes. Iran's foreign minister says the fighting, if it keeps continuing on in Lebanon, the entire war could restart.
In our view, there will certainly be a single fate for ending this war in Iran, in the region, and in Lebanon. That means either the war ends in both places, or the war continues in both places.
Now, we are tracking some reporting out of Iran that a delegation from Pakistan has arrived in Tehran today. They are obviously trying to work on negotiations and finally get this deal between the U.S. and Iran finalized. John.
All right, Jeff Paul reporting live from Dubai. Thank you, Jeff.
One way or the other is finished. It's either finished with a piece of paper or finished a more difficult way, although you could say a much easier way.
President Trump giving Iran 2 options to come to an agreement. As an advisor to the supreme leader there says negotiations with the U.S. have stalled. Let's bring in Dan Hoffman. He's former CIA station chief, now a Fox News contributor. Speaking of stalling, Dan, it seems like that's what the Iranians are trying to do.
I think they're doing that at the negotiating table. They're also trying to drive up the costs of the war for the United States. They're doing that by disrupting trade through the Strait of Hormuz and impacting the global economy. They've launched ballistic missile strikes against Kuwait and Bahrain, and Hezbollah has escalated strikes against Israel. So I think while Iran is concurrently doing that with an eye towards influencing the United States, they know that midterm elections are coming up and the president is facing some domestic pressure, and many voters and many in the Congress who are very much against continuing the war. Iran feels like that gives them added leverage, which is, I think, why they're making maximalist demands like $12 billion of sanctions relief just to arrive at an interim agreement. I don't think the president is going to go for that.
Yeah. There are concerns that they still want to get a nuclear weapon, despite, the weaponry that's been rained down upon them. What do you know about the status of their nuclear program? Is it completely buried at this point, or are they spiriting nuclear material out of the country?
Well, they still have the scientific know-how, and there's still a whole lot of uranium that was enriched just to under 4%. And if they were ever able to rebuild their centrifuges, then they could reconstitute their nuclear program. We've also got the roughly 1,000 pounds of highly enriched uranium we want to get out of the country. Now, right now, this hardliner IRGC-dominated Iranian regime is in absolutely, they have no interest whatsoever in negotiating in good faith with the Trump administration. So the question for President Trump is how to induce a change in the regime's behavior, or perhaps change the regime altogether. Remember that the United States supported Israel when Israel launched a number of decapitation strikes way back in February when the war began. We might be looking at another series of those sorts of strikes. If these leaders in Iran don't want to make a deal, maybe the next round will.
Pennsylvania Congresswoman Madeleine Dean says it's absolutely essential that we prevent Iran from getting any kind of a nuclear weapon. Listen.
We mustn't unfreeze those assets without actually getting some sort of justice and a deal. We should have built from the JCPOA. How it is that this president in his first simply tore up a deal with no better alternatives and then goes to war, goaded on by Mr. Netanyahu, and really against what we understand to be some of his top advisors.
So Iran is demanding, as you say, somewhere between $12 and $24 billion that they want us to just hand over to them. What would you advise the president, Dan?
Well, look, let's just be clear. The JCPOA was a bad deal, and there wasn't enough support in the Senate to make it a treaty. Even Senator Chuck Schumer didn't support it. That JCPOA included sunset clauses on the nuclear program, didn't address Iran's ballistic missile program or their support to proxy terrorists. So President Trump will be judged whether he can deliver a better deal than that. And he has said, President Trump has said, Iran wants to make a deal. Maybe there's something happening behind the scenes, but we're not seeing that publicly. And again, I think that military strikes by the United States and Israel potentially could be in the offing here if we don't see any change. And right now, Iran is ratcheting up the pressure on us and exhibiting extremely recalcitrant behavior at the negotiating table.
Yeah, here's a sample from Mohsen Rezai. He is the military advisor to the Iranian supreme leader. Listen. Sorry, I keep doing this. It's actually a statement that I'll read for you now. The negotiations are at a deadlock, and U.S. President Donald Trump must break this deadlock. The ball is in Trump's court. If he, Trump, wants to reach an agreement with Iran, this $24 billion is a test of trust that Iran wants to have with Trump. This is a test that America must pass, and the path will be opened. They're talking like they're holding all the cards here, Dan.
Well, they think they are, and I think President Trump is, I'm sure he's relying on Director CIA Ratcliffe to know what's actually happening behind the scenes. That sort of public statement is posturing, understandably so, but exactly how things are moving inside Tehran is another matter entirely. And look, the Iranians aren't interested in negotiating. They're interested in reducing or eliminating altogether U.S. influence in the Middle East. That's their big strategic play. And remember, they're a part of the axis of dictatorships supported by their allies Iran and China, and those two nations, our adversaries, want the same thing, to limit U.S. influence globally.
All right. Dan Hoffman, formerly with the CIA. Dan, thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Based on the news reports you shared, the conflict involving Iran has seen a sharp escalation with direct military engagements, stalled diplomatic talks, and regional fallout. Here is a summary of the most critical developments. 1. Military clashes and interceptions. Iranian attacks. Iran launched 4 one-way suicide drones toward the Strait of Hormuz and fired 7 ballistic missiles targeting U.S. allies Kuwait and Bahrain. The response, U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, intercepted all 4 drones. Of the 7 missiles, 6 were intercepted by air defense systems and 1 missed its target. Kuwait reported minor fires caused by falling debris, but no casualties. U.S. retaliation. Following the drone and missile launches, the U.S. military retaliated by striking Iranian coastal surveillance radar sites in Guruk and on Keshem Island. 2. Diplomatic deadlock and blame shift. Stalled peace talks. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader stated that negotiations are at a deadlock, placing the responsibility on the U.S., the ball is in Trump's court, and demanding the unfreezing of billions of dollars in Iranian assets. Ceasefire accusations. Iran accused the U.S. of violating a shaky ceasefire agreement originally established on April 8, framing its own drone and missile strikes as a legal act of self-defense. Conversely, the US maintains its retaliatory strikes were executed in self-defense following unwarranted Iranian aggression. The Hezbollah complication, achieving a US-Iran peace deal, is further complicated by ongoing fighting between Israel and Iran-backed Hezbollah. Tehran insists these hostilities must end before any peace agreement can be reached. While Israel and Lebanon agreed to renew a truce, Hezbollah rejected it, and active strikes continue in southern Lebanon. 3. Regional and geopolitical fallout. Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, condemnation. The Secretary-General of the GCC strongly condemned Iran's treacherous actions, calling them a dangerous escalation and a threat to regional stability. The Council affirmed its united support for Bahrain and Kuwait. World Cup visa dispute. Adding to the diplomatic friction, Iranian state media reported that the United States denied visas to 15 administrative and management members of Iran's delegation for the 2026 World Cup. While the players and technical staff received visas at their training camp in Turkey, the Iranian Soccer Federation announced plans to protest the decision through FIFA.